Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. You've joined fuelyourselffabulous.tv, and I'm Sabrina Khan. And before I introduce my next guest, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Nick Reed on the show with me today, I just want to let you know a bit about myself and why I set up this platform. Well, I set up this platform because I want to be at the forefront of the health and wellness revolution in women, and through that process revive the way they eat, move, think and live, because I really believe we're in a kind of very vulnerable world right now where dis-ease and obesity is at an all-time high. And I do believe with the correct change in lifestyle choices and food choices, you can get on a better path to help yourself. And certainly for myself, I suffered from IBS for a long time, for over 20 years, and weight issues for a long time. And I even had high cholesterol, and just through changes in lifestyle and diet, I managed to get rid of the symptoms and sort of ward certain things off. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. And I'm focusing on IBS in particular because last year I went through a really bad spurt, and I just realized how many other people there were in my boat, and they weren't really getting a lot of direct aid from the medical profession. And really this was set up as an information source where I get IBS experts in various different areas to talk about, what their view is, and, give you some tips on how they can help you. So today I've got Dr. Nick Reed on with me, who's a gastroenterologist and also chair at the IBS Network, which is the largest charity in Britain for IBS. So tell me a little bit more about yourself, Nick, and what is the definition of IBS to you?
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. It's lovely to be on and talk to you. I'm a retired gastroenterologist, but I still work as a psychotherapist, and I'm a qualified nutritionist. So in a way, I cover a lot of the angles on IBS. I've worked with the IBS Network for 21 years now, or 25 years nearly, because it was one of my patients originally who set up the IBS Network. It was a patient called Sue Backhouse. She set it up in 1991. So I was their medical advisor, and then I was on their trustees, and now I'm sort of the CEO, chair of trustees. So we've been going for a long time. The definition of IBS, how I understand IBS, is IBS. I mean, the simplest thing to say is it's a syndrome. There isn't an obvious cause. There isn't a clear mechanism, and there isn't an obvious treatment. So it all sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it, in a way? But nevertheless, it's a syndrome that comprises symptoms of abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, and constipation, but often includes a whole load of other symptoms besides. It's one of these medically unexplained conditions. There isn't an obvious pathology, there isn't an obvious cause, but nevertheless it's there, and it causes people a tremendous amount of distress. Yes. And because you can't quickly diagnose it with a test, it does tend to be rather ignored. People will go to their doctors, and they'll say that I've got this awful pain, I've got this awful diarrhea. The doctors will listen to them, probably do a couple of tests, and then say, well, it's just IBS. There's nothing much wrong with you, nothing seriously wrong with you. It's IBS. And they may, if they're good, they may then give them dietary advice or even counseling advice, or send them to a counselor or a dietitian. But more often than not, they say, well, you've got to cope with it. It's one of those things. Some of us have headaches. You have IBS, you've got to cope with it. Now, that isn't an answer to many people, and so many people who come to us at the IBS Network have a tremendous amount of difficulty with this. So we set up the IBS Network. What we do in the IBS Network, it's the national charity, as you said, for irritable bowel syndrome, and it exists to inform, to advise and support people with irritable bowel syndrome, and to work alongside the healthcare profession to promote self-care. What we want really is we want people to be really informed about their irritable bowel syndrome, to know what it's about and to know what they can do about it, and to know clearly where they can seek the right help. Because it's not entirely hopeless. There are ways through it. It's not rocket science either. It's not a complete mystery. I don't think it is. But you just need to get your head around what is an illness as opposed to a pathological disease, if you see what I mean.
Yes, because there's sort of, obviously there's diet related methodologies. There's also gut hypnotherapy, which I know Dr. Warwell is really a big advocate of, and I've heard that there's actually 80% success rate with that. So like you said, it's not a totally hopeless case, and I do feel there's a lot more research being done into the field. Like a lot of my guests who, you know, specialize in particular diets for it and are really well respected in the area, they're all saying that there seems to be a lot more focus and emphasis on it now. Is that something that you experience as well?
Yeah, there's a lot more interest in it. And I think it's coming from two directions, really. One is clearly it's coming from interest in the diet, and all the work on the FODMAP diet over the last 10 years or so has really focused attention on the foods that can stimulate the gut. So the foods like fermentable carbohydrates, the beans, the onions, the fruit, the vegetables, all of these things that your other guests have talked about, these will be fermented in the colon, produce gas, blow it up, produce bloating and pain and maybe bowel upset. So there's a lot of work from that direction. And the low FODMAP diet was developed as a way of saying these are the foods that can stimulate a gut with irritable bowel, or as I say, a sensitive gut. And then the other direction was there's been a lot of research, and I guess you will have had guests on that have talked about this. A lot of research on the brain-gut axis.
Yes.
The relationship between the mind and the gut, the way what's going on in your life can affect the way you feel down here. You know. The ENS system, the brain-gut axis. The brain-gut axis and the enteric nervous system. Yes, you're right. All of that. Lot of work, a lot of knowledge. What we're looking for, though, with all of this, we don't want to know the fine detail. We want to know about the concepts that are really going to help patients.
Yes.
You know, that's what we want to know. So there may be a funny nucleus in the brain that may light up in irritable bowel syndrome, but unless that can be turned into a treatment that helps patients, well, that's interesting, but what does it mean? You know, but there are mind-based treatments, psychotherapy, counseling, hypnotherapy, mindfulness, biofeedback. They can all be really useful. And the funny thing is that whatever treatment you choose, the success rate is about 80% for a time.
That's good. That's brilliant. So there is hope for IBS sufferers.
There is hope, and people get over IBS. Yes. You know, we had a meeting at the Allergy Show recently where I invited a group of patients who belong to the IBS Network to just tell people how I managed to get over my IBS. Because what we want to get across in the IBS Network is that there's a positive message. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not all moaning about doctors, aren't they hopeless, aren't they useless, and things like that. Is that, look, I took my IBS, I had terrible IBS, but I decided to do this, and now I feel so much better. I'm in control of my life. I'm doing things, you know. So there are ways of, it's not all hopeless by any stretch of the imagination, and people do get over IBS. But then maybe time passes and life hits them again, something happens, and they get another attack of IBS. But many of my patients say, well, I know this, I've been there before, this has happened before, it will go, I know what to do, you know. So that's where we're trying to get to with the IBS Network. We're trying to put people in charge of their condition.
Yeah, brilliant. And just before we go into the actual food and mood actual food and mood and what it is.
Yeah.
There is, as far as I'm aware, there's no cure for IBS, but you can help the symptoms. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Sabrina. It's there is no absolute cure because there's no absolute disease.
Right.
It's an illness, it's an ailment, which can be treated in several different ways. There's no absolute cure, but it can be treated. And that's the message I would like to get across, that this is a condition that you can treat. It is possible. Don't expect your doctor necessarily to treat it with drugs, or even your dietitian to necessarily treat it with diets, but you can manage it. You just need to get your head around it.
Brilliant. So when you say food and mood, because that's the whole area of discussion for us today, what is food and mood in IBS?
Okay, so I tend to use it because, I mean, it's silly really. I tend to use it because it rhymes and people remember it, you know. So we know, if I start off by saying that we know quite a lot about diet. We know that people with IBS are intolerant of food, or quite a number of foods. I did some research some years ago and tried to list the number of foods that people with IBS were intolerant of, and I came between 5 and 22. You know, different foods people were intolerant of. And we know what they are, basically. They can be dairy products, milk, wheat, certain vegetables, onions, beans, you know, certain fruits, etc., coffee, fats. There's a lot of foods. And the interesting thing is, and why I say it's an intolerance and not an allergy, is that an intolerance is really about the intolerant gut. It's not specifically about the food, it's about the gut being sensitive and intolerant. And if the gut is intolerant or sensitive, it will be sensitive to a range of different foods. And that's what we've got. Now, this begs the question, why is the gut sensitive? And this brings in food and mood. And it could be sensitive because the person with IBS had an attack of gastroenteritis, which has left their gut sensitive. It could be bottom up from an attack of gastroenteritis. It could be sensitive because they've been given a load of antibiotics, which have really flushed out all the good bacteria in the gut and made their gut sensitive. Or, and I think this is the most common reason, it could be sensitive because they've suffered a mishap in life, a trauma in life, which is sensitized the gut. There was, I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche, said, a philosopher, who said that all prejudices go to the gut. All bad things tend to go to the gut. So the things that happen to us can go to the gut. I'm not talking about major trauma. I'm not suggesting that everybody's been abused or been in a war situation or things like that. But the things that happen to us on a regular basis, there's nobody who hasn't been through some trauma of some sort. They may have lost a close relative. They may have suffered a real breakdown of a relationship that mattered very deeply. They may have lost a job that was really important. They may have been told they're hopeless and useless and, you know, a number of things. And it's really affected them. And it's been a gut-wrenching thing, if you like. And it's sensitized the gut. So when the gut becomes sensitive, it becomes sensitive to a whole range of foods, hence food and mood. If I'm upset, my gut will be sensitive. If something reminds me of what happened in the past, if it's an anniversary of what happened in the past, or something just reminds me, I go to a place, this was the place we went to before and I miss this relationship and things like that, then it goes to my gut and my food sensitivity starts again. I work as not only a gastroenterologist, but a psychotherapist. And this is what I hear a lot of the time. I'm lucky, I have time to listen to people. And therefore, this is what they tell me. And they tell me, they say, it's like my gut is my alarm signal, my distress signal. It goes off when something happens. And that's really important to know. And oftentimes, doctors, dietitians don't always realize that. They say, oh, I can't be dealing with emotions because I'm not trained to deal with it. But actually, it's human stuff, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, you get in there, listen to people. It's not rocket science.
Well, that's why, you see, I'm becoming a health coach, because it doesn't just entail the whole food thing. It's also part of listening to people and you know, just empathizing with them and just being there, because a lot of the time it's just someone to listen to in this kind of day and age.
Yes, yes, it is. And there aren't people necessarily. People are so busy this day and age,
Yes.
you know. We live in a very hectic time. People don't necessarily listen to each other. I mean, you know, it's good. We're on a computer, we're listening to each other at the moment, but most people go on computers and they're tapping away like mad. And nobody's really listening to anybody. They're just sort of saying, hey, look what I've done today. Isn't this fantastic? Or, you know, I'm having a terrible time today. They're just blowing off, but they're not able to interact, if you see what I mean. We want more stuff like this, you see, Sabrina.
Yeah, brilliant. But do you find that when, so people come to you and they talk to you and they say, you know, this is what, you know, I listen to my gut and that's an alarm sign for me. Do you find that just sometimes you listening to them can actually help them or help ease their symptoms, or I mean, does it help in any way?
Yes, it does. I mean, yes, it helps. It helps a lot, and you can sometimes, you know, you can see it in a session how it helps.
Yeah.
For example, you know, somebody will come in sometime. I mean, this is a story, but I remember one man coming in to see me, and he was complaining of, or he said he had what's called borborygmi, the rumbling in the gut, you know, the noises in the gut, and they really bothered him, and he was uncomfortable, and he said, oh, you know, I've got these terrible noises, and they go on. And I was working as a jobbing gastroenterologist at the time, and I said to him, I was slightly irritated, I said, his name was Chris, and I said, look, Chris, look, let's both be very, very quiet. I'll listen to your gut rumbling. You listen to my gut rumbling. They would talk to each other. Let's just listen to them. And we did, and our guts talked to each other. And then he said to me, but doctor, you don't understand. This is so bad. And it was the way he said so bad that sounded to me like guilty secrets. So I said that to him. I said, that sounds like guilty secrets. And then he told me that he was having an affair with somebody at the golf club, and his wife, he loved his wife dearly, but you know, she would be so upset, and he loved his children, and it was awful. And then he said he was involved in all sorts of businesses which were a little bit dodgy, and he would go to board meetings and his gut would start rumbling and he'd have to go out of the room because his gut was betraying him. It was like a lie detector. It was betraying his emotions. And when he started talking about that, and we were able to talk about it, not only did his gut quieten down completely, but his IBS went away.
Oh, wow.
You know, I mean, it's magic in a way. It sounds magic, but it's not magic. It's not rocket science. It's the way our mind and our gut are wired up.
Yes.
And if we can begin to understand those connections, or just listen to people, just explore it, then you know, the symptoms can go away. I'm not saying they go away in everybody.
Yes.
I've got very deep-seated symptoms, but it can really be a help, and it's just talking. It's not magic, and you don't need to have years and years of training to do it either.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's really, really great to know. So that definitely makes me think that, yeah, we've heard a lot of my experts have talked about the brain-gut axis and the brain-gut sort of connection. So this really sort of cements that relationship that you've just said, that you've just talked about now. Yeah, because we're not cut off at the neck, are we? I mean, whatever happens here, we feel, you know, in our body. We know it every single day of our lives. You know, if something happens, oh, we've got a lump in our throat. If something happens that upsets us, we feel a lump in our throat. Now, if I was a physiologist, I'd say that the upper esophageal sphincter has gone into spasm.
But as a psychologist, I know that people who are upset get a lump in their throat,
Yes.
you know. And similarly, if I were able to look into the gut when somebody is experiencing emotion, I would see it change. I would see it secrete or be very active or go red or go white. There was, you know, just to cement this a little bit, there were some wonderful experiments done really a long time ago now, where people had gastrostomies. You know, they were fed by putting food directly into the stomach because they'd had an accident or they'd scarred their esophagus or something like that. But they were studied, and the researchers were able to look at the stomach all the time, you know, and they noticed that when those people were upset, if they were frightened about something, scared about something, the stomach went white and stopped secreting. When they were angry, it went red and started, you know, secreting a lot of acid. And if they were really annoyed about something for a long period of time, then it started to break down as an ulcer. So what's going on here really affects what's happening down here.
There as well. Oh, it's brilliant. Really interesting. So then this leads me to the next question. So even a normally safe food, it depends on when it is eaten. So if you're going through a particularly anxious time or a stressful time, so will that affect the mood or affect your state or your IBS, even a normal IBS safe food, depending on when it's eaten?
Yeah, the context is really important. The context in which it's eaten. You know, if you're sitting at a table with the family and you have a row with the family, you get indigestion. You don't feel like finishing your meal. You may get pain and things like that. So you know, it really affects you. If, for example, you are having a particular meal. You know, I had a patient once who told me I'd gone to this lovely restaurant. My boyfriend had invited me. I'd gone to this lovely restaurant. We had a lovely fish meal. And then he told me that he didn't want to see me anymore. In other words, she got dumped at the meal. And she said that she was so upset because she thought they were going to get married, and you know, it didn't happen. As she ran out of the restaurant, she ran to the loo. She was violently sick. She had diarrhea. She went home, and she wasn't able to talk to anybody about it. It was so shameful. And she turned up in my clinic 3 years later with food intolerance, and she told me this story. And the worst thing was fish. And it was like the context, any connection with fish revoked that memory, you know, that memory was consolidated with fish. Yes. And started all her symptoms going again. But she said it's the fish, of course, because she didn't want to think that it was the rejection. And that's where the context is really important. You know, if you have a meal with a family and you're not getting on with that family, every time you sit down to a meal with the family, you might get irritable bowel. You know, it's food for thought, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely food for thought. And so that's why people, I mean, I see it over and over again in Facebook groups. Oh, this food is normally fine for me, but I've eaten it and now all of a sudden I'm sort of playing up. And in my mind, it was just a matter of sort of FODMAP load, you know, an excess of FODMAP over time, or trigger food load. So I simply thought, I mean, obviously I know there's a stress connection, but really what you're saying, it just depends on if there's any association from the past with that food, or in particular when you're eating the food, or just everything surrounding the context of the food that can lead to your gut having a flare up or being sensitive again.
Yes, it's exactly what I'm saying. And, you know, and we all experience it. I mean, luckily, I don't have severe IBS. I get IBS type symptoms from time to time, but nothing severe. Yes. But I know there are some times that I will have a meal and I feel a bit queasy, a bit sick. And it's the same meal as I've had before, but it may be at a time when I've really been working hard, put myself under pressure, worried about failing, trying to meet deadlines, you know, and trying to eat at the same time. and it doesn't work,
No.
you know. So you've got to get the context right. And a lot of people say to me, oh, you know, I'm on a FODMAP diet, but actually I've now got symptoms again. So what's happening? And I would say to them, well, you could go back to the dietitian and you could be more rigorous with your diet, but I don't want people to be rigorous with their diets, you see, because I think you end up with a food obsession, which is really difficult. What I want people to realize is that, yes, it's sensible to restrict those foods that are likely to trigger a sensitive gut, but do look at the context at the same time and what might be going on. Look at the two together, be reflective. And then you don't need to go on these extreme diets.
Yes. Yes.
Be sensible. We're bringing out a book next year called Cooking for the Sensitive Gut. And what we're trying to do is to show people they can cook lovely meals on a restricted diet, but we don't want them to absolutely eliminate everything. You can have little bits of most things. And then when you're feeling better, you can have more of it.
Oh, that's brilliant. No, that'd be really interesting. That's really interesting stuff. But so, and the thing is, that's the other thing about I know when people are on these various diets, and like some people are kind of so particular and anal about it, you know, it's got to be followed down to the T. And I had the Monash University people on last week, and they said it's a guide. If you veer off it, it's fine. It's not going to kill you. So there's some people that are sort of so, you know, sort of so black and white with it, but it doesn't work like that. Like you said, you don't want to restrict people to that extent.
No, that's absolutely right, Sabrina, and I think that's a really important message, because I also listened to Peter Gibson, who is the gastroenterologist who works with the Monash people. He was over in Sheffield last week, and he's very relaxed about it. You know, he's not hard line. He sort of says, you know, okay, you know, you find your own level. And what he doesn't want people to restrict and restrict and restrict. He wants them very quickly to get back and find out what foods they can eat.
Yes.
And he also, it's interesting actually, he was telling me that his recent research was comparing hypnotherapy with a low FODMAP diet. And of course he found them equally effective.
Yes.
Equally effective. So there's more routes. There's more routes to the treatment of IBS than going down one particular line, you know. It's an important message, really. So don't be too strict about your diet. Be relaxed, but be reflective about what might be going on.
So then another question I have is, obviously with IBS, we know that a certain percentage of people have food intolerances. So can the context in which food is taken cause the intolerance or sensitivity of the food?
Yeah, well, very much so. I mean, my story about the woman who with the fish is a great example of that, really. So that's the context. That's what she was allergic to. Oh, there's another story I remember. I mean, kids are notoriously fussy over foods, and they won't eat certain foods at certain times and would eat other foods at other times. My brother would never eat apple. I remember he would never have apples, and my mum used to like to make baked apple, and mum knew this was a thing, you know, and she hit on the ploy of saying, okay, we're going to call this apple Simon Apple. This is your special apple, Simon Apple, to do this. And then he would just eat that food. He would say, well, can we have Simon Apple today? So he'd eat it because it was special for him. That was food. So, you know, using a bit of psychology, you can turn it round. That's why I say it's not entirely rocket science. Of course, I'm not meaning to dismiss what the dietitians do. They do a tremendous job, and it's really important that with people who do have IBS, that they can actually have the confidence of being able to work, of being able to live within dietetic limits.
Yes.
But you don't want to live forever within those.
No. And the thing is,
be able to broaden out, you know. Yeah, it's only for, as Peter Gibson said, a FODMAP diet is not for life.
No, no, definitely not. But it's not. So what you're saying, we know that the FODMAP diet is not for life, and lots of my guests have said that. But obviously, we know that with IBS, there's lots of other trigger foods as well, like fatty foods, fried foods,
Yeah.
dairy, meat, spicy foods. But are you saying, depending on the context that they're eating as well, if you can make, potentially they could stop being trigger foods for you as well?
Well, they may be. I'm not exactly saying that. What I'm saying, Sabrina, is that that there may be particular contexts that people are really get people going. But very often it may be that something, the way they're living their life, the stress they put themselves under, the how busy they are, how tense their relationships are, that may be, in general, what's sensitizing the gut. Yes. And when the gut has become sensitized, it will become sensitive to a range of different foods. Yes. That's the more common situation, that their lifestyle and their life pattern, or the things that are generally happening in their lives, like the woman I saw last week who has 3 children and never has a moment's rest.
Yes.
Never has a moment's rest, and she's constantly upset. Yeah.
But then, the thing is, the kind of society that we live in, and everyone's sort of trying to juggle so many different things, and everyone's trying to make a great living, keep up with the Joneses, look after their children. What can you really do to switch off? Obviously, we all know yoga and meditation and walking or anything stress busting, but on a day-to-day basis, if the environment is just as important as the food itself, what can people do on a day-to-day basis then to sort of prevent sensitization of a gut?
Well, there are a number of things you can do, and the important thing is to make sure that you take time out, even no matter how busy you are. Make sure that you work, if you're at work for an hour, focus on something for an hour, take a break, rest, have a cup of tea, go out, talk to people, come back, start again, have 10 minutes off, have a quarter of an hour off, have a break. In particularly, have a break from your computer. If you're constantly on the computer, when you're working on emails and things like that, you're constantly tense. You're constantly on the go. Things are coming through the whole time. There's another one pinged in. Oh, I've got to do this quickly.
Yeah.
I've got to do that. I've got 20 emails to answer before lunch, and etc. Then I've got to get on with the next thing. It's constant demand. So you've got to take a break. I've found personally that I deliberately divide my day up and take a fairly long break. So I would start working on what I call my creative stuff, my more creative writing, early in the morning, usually about 6:30. I can then work for a couple of hours, and then I go for a run, a swim, and do some yoga, which usually takes 2 hours. And then I'm in a great mood for facing the rest of the day. And everything's nicely relaxed. Now, I realize not everybody can do that.
Yes.
You've got to be an old chap to be able to do that. But nevertheless, if you can get a break, and it's a relaxing break, and it's in the country, and you're doing something you enjoy, even for half an hour, if it's a regular thing, golly, you feel so much better. Yes. You get everything in perspective. You can get back, and if the kids are playing up, okay, you can deal with it. You can deal with it with a smile on your face, and it's a lot better. So you can. I know there'll be a lot of people listening to this and say, oh, well, it's all right for him. I mean, they don't know what my life is like and things like that. Well, think about your life. Think about it. What can you do about it? You can't continue to live under this continuous stress. It won't do you any good. You will end up with a serious illness if you carry on doing it. And that's the message, really. Because IBS is one thing. IBS is reversible. If it went on and you developed another illness like Crohn's disease or colitis or something like that, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's the thing, and we know that all disease starts in the gut, and it's a really sort of a big area of research at the moment, sort of the
Yeah.
human microbiome, and they're discovering a lot of things, that it's a lot of illnesses are are related to the microbiome being out of balance.
Oh, that's absolutely right. There's a big story there, isn't there? And it's really important. And if you're stressed, your microbiome does get out of balance. And also, your gut becomes permeable, and some of those bugs get into the system and they cause inflammation in the liver, in the brain, and the muscles. It causes big trouble. So, you know, looking after yourself and your gut microbes, really important. I mean, that's the future. The microbes in our gut, certainly, yes.
And do you have any other tips? Because I know sort of fermented foods is big and probiotics is big. Like how else, apart from reduced stress and anxiety and just being mindful and evaluating situations, can people look after the microbiome in their gut?
Well, everybody is different, Sabrina, really. I would just say that it's really important to take time out to be able to look at your life. If you're suffering with IBS and you've suffered with it for years, take time out, look at your life, you know, just look forward a little bit, just say, do I want to be like this when I'm 45? You know, do I want to continue to live like this? Can I do anything about it? And sometimes you may have to make really tough decisions. You know, sometimes we have to walk away from situations. We have to find that peace in our lives. Sometimes we have to find enough peace to be able to cope with a situation that we may be struggling with, you know. But I think it's really important to step back and just think about it. Have a word with, by all means, you know, there are lifestyle counselors and there are therapists out there, but you probably don't need to go and see a psychotherapist with a capital P. You need to be able to talk to somebody who will reflect back to you and sort of say, have you thought about this? You know, is this really good for you?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
Doing that, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. That's really sound advice. And just before we take sort of viewer and listener questions, obviously this is a live show. You can ask Dr. Reid questions. If you just go to the bottom of the page and put in your questions, we can get them answered. But is there anything else on a sort of final note that you'd like to say about the topic of food and mood?
Well, the only other thing I would say, and I know that you flagged up this on your questions to begin with, and that was that actually, of course, the food we eat can affect our mood. It can be a vicious cycle. So, for example, we know that if we have a fatty meal, it makes us really tired. But it can also make us really sick and nauseated. You know, it can make us feel uncomfortable down there. So we might have this awkward sort of, oh, I feel tired, but I feel, I can't get to sleep because I'm a bit upset. So fat has a bit of a double-edged sword. Eating sugar and very sweet foods, readily absorbed sugar, can make us very lively. It stimulates the heart. It gets us going. It's good for energy, you know. So there are things. So it works both ways round. If our mood affects the way food's going through our gut and making us intolerant of food, then the symptoms will make us feel. Then it can be reflected in symptoms, which, after all, are our brain things, because we don't feel our symptoms here. We feel them. They relate to our brain, and we feel them here, and they tell us that actually it's something going on in our gut. That makes sense. So the whole lot goes round as a vicious circle. And when you're treating people with IBS, you've got to break that vicious circle somehow. Now, the dietitians would, and quite rightly, say, put them on a low FODMAP diet, they're relaxed, they're not getting so much trouble with food, and then you can start to think. And but I think thinking about what may be happening and changing your life then becomes really important. The diet itself is not the whole answer.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Just before this, I was going into, I think there was a big talk a couple of years ago on, it's echoing now. There was a big talk a couple of years ago where we had the dietitian's perspective, the scientist's perspective, the gastroenterologist's perspective. So everyone is actually going to have a different spin, and everyone's got a valid theory and a valid viewpoint. So it's got to be looked at as from a holistic viewpoint, as an isolated.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's got to be holistic. You've got to come at it from all angles, and different patients are going to need different solutions. Yes. You've got to know, you've got to listen to your patient or your client and know where they're coming from and what's going to work for them. And indeed, they, as patients, need to understand where you're coming from and what is likely to work for you. And but be honest with the fact that there may be situations that you don't want to look at, but they're really affecting your gut.
Yes. Yes, no, it makes a lot of sense. That's really good advice. And I've got a question coming in from a Sam from Somerset. And so she says, how can I ensure then every meal is stress-free and free of anxiety?
Oh, well, it depends on the context of your meals, really. That's a very difficult one to answer. I think it's really important if you're in a family. I think it's really important for families to eat together. I think it's really important for families not to have special meals for each person in the family. I think it's really important for families to cook together if they can. We had our nephews, nieces around recently, and we cooked a meal together, and they were great. They were saying, what can I do now? What can I do now? Get them involved, get them going, get them to have some sort of ownership. Make it a fun experience. Now, I know that the person who asked that question will say, oh, you don't know what it's like. Well, I don't know what it's like, but be inventive and try and make this a kind of fun experience, and not, you've got to do this, or we're going to have, make it more fun, but don't be run ragged by cooking special meals for everybody, because that gets daft.
That gets really difficult. And Emma from Charlotte wants to know, what can I incorporate into my daily life, and what changes can I make to manage my mood better? We did sort of touch on this a little bit initially, but
yeah, I mean, no, I think having breaks during the day is really important. I think anything you can introduce in your daily lifestyle that gets you in the, if you like, in the zone. I know people talk about mindfulness, which is fine, but I think there's nothing special about mindfulness. It's just the ability to get in the zone and feel good about yourself. Anything creative that you can do. Try not to live your life reacting to situations. Enjoy what you can do creatively. So by that I mean, it may be cooking, it may be some form of exercise, it may be dancing, it may be painting, it may be listening to music, something that takes it, or writing, takes you out of yourself, gets you into the zone. So you feel good about yourself. That's really good, because we do spend, and I think this is a major problem with people at the moment, or all of us at the moment, we spend too much of our lives reacting to situations and not really enjoying them or being creative. I think that's very important.
Yeah, this weekend I went away with my girlfriends and we did some mask decorating, just artistic stuff. And I used to paint a lot and draw a lot. And like you said, it was creative. It takes you out of the moment. It was the most enjoyable experience I've had in such a long time. So you are so right to try to do activities that take you out of yourself, where I think especially for women, I mean, I don't know if this counts for men as well, but women are general kind of generally more creative. So just to get back into that zone again is nice sometimes.
Oh, it works for men as well.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. It works for men as well.
But I think think creative is really important. Don't just react to situations. Life is not just a trial to tolerate. It's about really going out there, enjoying it. Find out who you are, what you can do, what you can give to the world. Things like that. Really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And just one final question, and it's Nicola from York, and what she wants to know is, so could the food and mood connection be the reason why every meal, even foods that are good for IBS, cause me aggravation and tummy problems? Could it just be that I'm just stressed out all the time or run down all the time?
Well, it could be, Nicola. It could be. Only you can say that, really. But it might well be if you see that your life really is stressful and you don't have any time for yourself, then do address that, because certainly if that's the case and you're constantly living on your nerves, it will make your gut sensitive to all sorts of foods, and it could well be that. So, you know, if that's the case, think about it, reflect on it, get some time free. If it's something really difficult, go and speak to somebody about it, phone a friend, whatever, you know. Don't just put up with it. Life is not just meant to be tolerated, it's meant to be enjoyed. And if you enjoy it, the people around you will enjoy it as well.
Yeah, the thing is, I think the kind of society you live in, where it's just all guns blazing and all hands on the decks, I think people forget that life is actually to be enjoyed sometimes.
Yeah.
And if someone wanted to get in touch with you or the charity, how can they do that?
Well, the charity, you can get in touch with the IBS Network. We're on www.theibsnetwork. Remember the because it leads you to funny sites otherwise. theibsnetwork.org. I can be contacted through the IBS Network. I do see patients from time to time, but I'm not touting for business because I'm too busy a lot of the time. But nevertheless, yes, I mean, go on the IBS site, join, become a member, get involved with what we're doing. We need a lot more people on the IBS Network. We need to get out there all together and make a big difference, because I know we can make a difference, but we just need everybody to come on board, and we can make people listen.
Yeah, there is actually a lot of information on there, so that's brilliant. And in terms of, if you found this interview on my site, then do get your free gift, and that way you'll also actually register for up and coming interviews as well, because yeah, I mean, for the next few weeks I've just got a lot more amazing guests as well. So it's yeah, over and out from Sabrina Khan and Dr. Nick Reed, and I'll see you next time.